Today, we're going to discuss why time travel is an unwise concept. Firstly, many historical moments are not enjoyable, particularly for the people living through them. To be frank, historical moments often prove to be quite disagreeable. One of the most frequent catastrophic occurrences in history is infectious diseases that can lead to death on an unprecedented scale. You have all witnessed a prime example of this recently, the pandemic. We endured an infection that essentially doubled the likelihood of fatalities between 2020 and 2021, either due to the disease itself or related factors. And this is even with all the advancements in modern medicine and a thorough understanding of how diseases operate. However, for a significant portion of history, that was not the case. If you were to journey to ancient Rome and contract a bacterial infection, you wouldn't have ready access to antibiotics. Even if you brought your antibiotics, they would only shield you from bacteria. There were still fungi and viruses that could infect you, not to mention potential environmental dangers like exposure to lead and other hazardous materials, unbeknownst to the people of that era. The symbol for lead on the periodic table is Pb because that's the abbreviation for plumbum, the Latin term for lead. The Romans extensively used lead pipes without realizing they were poisoning themselves. And if you think they were ignorant, don't forget that up until a century ago, it wasn't uncommon to believe that smoking was beneficial for the lungs. But returning to diseases, viruses also cause infections that can be fatal, and that was one of the primary causes of death in the world until the invention of vaccines. It's challenging to explain to a modern human just how devastating the smallpox virus was throughout history. In the last century alone, this virus resulted in over 300 million deaths, and I must remind you that the world's population was much smaller during that period. We were so troubled by this virus that we completely eradicated it. We eradicated a viral disease in retribution for all the harm it inflicted on humanity. Yes, you are protected from smallpox and many other modern diseases because of vaccines, and here I need to emphasize modern. If you were to time travel to Rome in the year 165, that was precisely the year when it was hit by some viral disease, perhaps smallpox or something similar. There is no guarantee that the vaccines you've taken would shield you from that version of the disease. Even the common flu from that era could become problematic if you were to contract it. So, time traveling to the past is perilous due to diseases, plain and simple. You could literally perish from the flu. But even if your immune system is robust, you could still jeopardize all of human history inadvertently by carrying diseases with you on your journey to the past. We've even witnessed the consequences when a large population without immunity encounters a potent infectious disease. This is precisely what occurred in the 16th century. The densely populated living conditions in Europe had provided an ideal environment for infectious diseases to evolve rapidly. With the European colonization of the Americas, indigenous populations were exposed to European infections, causing devastation and unparalleled mortality among the native populations of the continent. If you were to travel to the past, you could trigger an unprecedented infectious epidemic and fundamentally alter the course of human history. Just imagine introducing COVID to ancient Rome. It would be a catastrophic event. However, let's assume for a moment that you somehow managed to evade the major problem of diseases. You'd still face other challenges. One issue is communication. Human language is fluid and constantly evolving, making it difficult to ascertain precisely how our ancestors spoke, even if we know the language they used. We lack details such as accents, intonations, or the specific words used in particular dialects. Numerous everyday language nuances do not preserve well in the records we have. For instance, the Romans spoke Latin, but we are uncertain about the exact pronunciation of words. Furthermore, the way people spoke naturally changed over the millennia that the Roman Empire existed. Not to mention the presence of local dialects, historical records, and other social factors affecting communication. If you intend to travel to the past and communicate with someone, you'll need extensive linguistic preparation. Moreover, you must be prepared to adapt and learn a new way of speaking on the spot. This brings us to the third issue: being perceived as a foreigner is hazardous. Both your appearance and your attempts to communicate and comprehend the language will signal that you are an outsider to that community. In other words, a foreigner, and that alone can be perilous. Xenophobia is a technical term where xeno denotes from the outside. Xenophobia is something that still exists today, of course, but it can pose significant problems when time traveling. In many historical cultures, foreigners were enslaved or treated as inferior individuals at best. You are not merely a foreigner, you possess all the knowledge of the modern world. As a result, your ideas might be viewed as witchcraft, heresy, or a challenge to social norms. This is even more dangerous if they discover your time machine, since during the Middle Ages in Europe, people were executed for far less. And thus far, we've only discussed the past, but the same problems apply to the future. There is a natural expectation of progress when contemplating the future, assuming that tomorrow will be better than today. This was indeed the case for many historical periods, at least in certain parts of the world or specific aspects of society, culture, and technology. The 20th century was characterized by dreadful global conflicts, but it also witnessed technological advancements that brought practical conveniences to everyday life. Similarly, the concrete and logistics of ancient Rome provided conveniences for its inhabitants. There were periods of evolution when the world, from the perspective of the Romans, improved gradually. However, this was not always the case. History has witnessed collapses, regressions, and disasters, and these will inevitably recur in our own civilization. If you were to travel to the year 2300, you might encounter a world divided, with extensive regions of the planet facing terrible conditions due to global warming. Alternatively, you might encounter an uninhabited planet, destroyed by some mysterious catastrophe. The future can be just as dangerous as the past, if not more so, as we lack information about what lies ahead. And I haven't even begun to discuss possible paradoxes. What precisely happens if you travel back in time and alter history? Will the future genuinely change from that point onward? Or will those changes prevent you from ever existing in the first place to embark on your time travel journey? Which version of history becomes the valid one? This is known as the grandfather paradox. Attempting to prevent your own birth leads to a loop of causality, creating confusion and contradictions. Time travel means that sooner or later, we will encounter answers to these paradoxes. Perhaps changing the past creates an alternate timeline, leaving you trapped without the ability to return to your original present. Or maybe you'll discover that history cannot be changed, and the actions you took were already a part of history. These potential challenges extend beyond paradoxes to identity issues that may arise. What do you do if two versions of yourself exist simultaneously? Do you pretend to be siblings? Share your identification documents? Or does one of you adopt a false identity? With that said, I'll see you in the next video.